Welcome everyone to build your first CI/CD pipeline. Oh, here we go. My name is Amber Matz. I'm a developer advocate at Tugboat. And today we're going to talk about my journey from knowing basically nothing about CI/CD pipelines, entering into a job where it's more in the DevOps space and being curious about how these work. And instead of asking someone else to do it for me, I decided to create a sandbox where I could learn these principles and put something in place. And this is my journey of what I did. Today's quest, I'm going to talk about how I created a sandbox to experiment with a CI/CD pipeline. I'm going to talk about a process of adding a local CLI tool to a CI/CD check, and 6 essential concepts I learned along the way. So what is a CI/CD pipeline? It's lots of things, but how I'm going to describe it is a sequence of triggered automated checks designed to increase confidence that code is ready to ship. Here's an example. I've got a Git repository checked out, and I'm testing out a new wallpaper. And so this is all ready to go. It's looking good on my local. I'm going to push it up to my repo and create a pull request. This triggers a series of checks, and this is what we're talking about. These checks that pop up in GitHub, and they have little yellow and green dots, and what's happening behind the scenes is different checks are running, and these different jobs that we're going to talk about today. So this is the process that I'm talking about, and so you're going to learn today how to get in there and add your own CI/CD checks to that type of pipeline. Where I started was I had a local repository, and I could do some work, do a commit, and just do YOLO commits to main and just push it on up there. I'm not doing any pull requests. I'm not triggering any quality checks. I'm not doing any of that. And I'm not triggering any kind of automated deployment. So that's my starting point, is like, oh, sure, yeah, I'm using version control, and I'm just going to commit to the main branch. No big deal. So I wanted to do something a little bit more robust. My CI/CD sandbox, I used this template, this Kai Jimmy / Hugo theme stack starter. It's a Git repository template. So you can create a repository based on that repository. It becomes a template, and you get all sorts of goodies when you do it that way, instead of just a blank slate. I named the repo my username on GitHub, which is agentolivia.github.io. And this is a magical thing that you can do to get GitHub Pages deployment for free. And then you configure it in GitHub. You go to Settings, Pages, and you select as a source GitHub Actions. So by naming your repository, by creating my repository based on this template, this repo template, and then naming the repository my GitHub username.github.io, I can then go into settings and select GitHub Actions as my build and deployment mechanism. Next, I'm going to set up my local. So I'm going to git clone my newly created GitHub repository, which was created based on that template and was configured to use GitHub Actions. And then I need to set up my environment. And in order to get this up and running, this is a Hugo site. In order to get this up and running on my Mac, I need to use Homebrew to install Hugo, which is running, it's the static site generator, and Go. And I need to keep this in mind. I need to remember that, oh yeah, I had to install Hugo and Go to get this running on my computer, because that's going to be important later when we're trying to run this on a different server. And then I build and run. So from the command line, I type out Hugo serve or Hugo server, and it's going to give me a local host with a port, and I can preview my changes there. It's going to build the site, do its thing, and I can see how it's going to look on my local. So that's step one. Set up the local, get your environment up and running, get your repo cloned to your local, and see if it works. And don't move forward until it's working on your local. So this is going to be a trick to hold a microphone and type. Okay. Amy June, do you want to help hold the mic for me? Thank you. I know you. This is asking a lot. Okay. So which one are we doing? We're doing first deploy. Okay. Step one. Okay, and let's take a look at deploy.yml. Now this is a file that came with the GitHub repo. So this came, I did not write this, but it came with the GitHub repo template that I used to create mine. And this is what I got from it. I got this build and deploy, and the first thing you want to notice is this on keyword. And it looks like, oh, we've got this trigger. It looks like what's going to happen is when I'm pushing to the main branch, something's going to happen. All these things are going to happen. There's some permissions here. It's running in this group called Pages, and it's going to run some jobs. It's going to set up an environment with Dart SAS and Go, a certain version of Hugo and Node, and even a time zone, which is interesting. And then it's going to run some steps. It's going to do a checkout, and it's referencing this other shortcut sort of a thing. And this is a GitHub action, which is its own set of steps that you get for free. It is a supply chain thing. So you are introducing, just like a Node module, you are introducing some external code into your workflow. You should be aware of that. And you're setting up Go with a certain version, Node.js, and Pages. So I'm like, okay, and my eyes are quickly starting to glaze over as I'm going through this. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad this is here. Thank you for that. I don't really understand everything that's going on here. And there's also this update theme, which is running on a cron schedule. And maybe that's why we need the time zone set right here. So this is what I got for free. So I'm like, oh, am I already done? Like I chose this GitHub repo template, and I got a build and deploy job for free, workflow for free. Well, this is great. Like now I want to get into the middle of this and add some quality checks. So I've got the beginning step, I can commit to main, and I've got the end, the build and deploy, and now I'm ready to fill in the middle with some quality checks. So it's kind of a cool starting point, to be honest. So here's where we're at. I can commit code changes to main, I can push it to the repo, and that's going to trigger an automatic deployment to GitHub Pages, and it's going to be live on agentolivia.github.io. Cool. All right. So here's a process that I am proposing if you want to play around with this. Install a CLI tool locally that you like, run it, tune the configuration, tune the ignore file that comes with that you can create for it until it's useful. So keep running it until you're like, oh, this set of results here is actually now pretty useful to me. And I'm like ready to put it into my pipeline. You're going to add that command to the scripts key in your package.json file. And I'm talking about like an NPM tool here. And you're going to fix the files until the tool returns 0 failures. So you've installed it, you've tuned the configuration, and it's returning useful errors. You fix those errors in your code, and then you're ready to commit the changes. So this is a process for setting up and testing a tool locally before adding it to your pipeline. Okay, so my first quality check, I'm just going to choose Prettier. So Prettier, you can set up a set of standards for how you want your code formatted, and then it will automatically enforce those rules for you. So I'm going to run npm install save dev Prettier. I'm going to create the config and ignore files for that, the .prettier rc and the .prettier ignore files. I'm going to use some documentation or even AI to help tune those configurations. I'm going to pay attention to the errors that I'm getting and try and get these config files tuned so I'm getting a useful set of failures that are actually helpful to me. And then once that's all done, I'm going to add that command to the script's key in the package.json. So I'm creating a command called format:check, and that's going to run prettier -- check. Run the command, run the npm command, npm run format:check, and then just keep refining it until it's useful. And you want to think, every time you're going through setting up these tools and refining them, what did I need in order to run this? Think about the prerequisites. And what did I need? I needed Node.js. So it's always take notes of what you're installing along the way to even run a command. I had this benefit that I had a new computer that I was setting up. So I didn't have any of my developer tools installed on my machine. So I was installing Node for the first time. I was installing Hugo for the first time. All of these were new and I was getting it set up. But if you have a machine that has all these tools already, you're going to need to think about what are the actual dependencies here. And it's easy to forget once you've been using these, using Node for years and years. It's easy to forget, but we need to be cognizant of what we need in the environment.
Could you run it inside of a container so you get that sort of fresh state?
Yeah, and I was using DDEV locally, and I was checking out the versions of the software that we're running in DDEV, and I was matching it to what I have set up in my workflow. And because it is going to be running in a container on, when you're running the CI/CD pipeline. So yeah, you want to have that kind of mindset of like, okay, I'm in a container. It's a blank box. What do I need to put inside there? I need an operating system. I need this software. What do I need to actually run this? Okay, next I'm gonna add a workflow. I'm gonna create a file. Now this is just for GitHub. The concept is the same for GitLab. I haven't tried it with Bitbucket, but the locations and the names of the files are going to be a little bit different. So I'm just going to focus on GitHub for this talk. So in the root of your repo, create a .github/workflows directory, and then name the file whatever it is that you want, something that makes sense to you that's a little bit descriptive of what this workflow is going to do. And the only thing that's required is the .yml extension. Find an action that fits. So there might already be an action that has been written for the tool that you want to run. It could be in the tool's docs, the documentation. For that tool might have a GitHub action already documented, and you can copy and paste from that. Or the GitHub Action Marketplace has a bunch of workflows all ready to go that you can copy and paste from, or you can reference them. In your IDE, In my case, I was using VS Code. You can install a GitHub Actions extension that will help you to validate and even explain the different keys in that file, and that can help you learn what's going on there. I mentioned a lot of this already, so kind of where do I find the copy pasta for the workflow? I'm not going to just write this from scratch. I want to copy a starting place. Check the official docs of the tool. Check if there's an official action in the GitHub Actions marketplace. You can also ask AI, right? And I did lean heavily on that when I was trying to figure this out. Like, create a GitHub Actions workflow that runs prettier on push and a PR, uses Node, and fails if the files aren't formatted. So that was really helpful to get started. Thank you. Okay, so let's take a look at my first one. So I want to check this tag out. Okay, so here's where I started with the lint workflow. I know prettier isn't technically a linter, but I just called it that because you can run multiple tools in a workflow. So this is the
once in a while it gets quieter for the people online. Like, I don't know if the microphone's in different position.
A push to main or a pull request, and this workflow dispatch is like a manual trigger in GitHub where you can manually run the workflow. So the job, it's going to run on Ubuntu latest. It's going to check out the code. It's going to set up Node.js. This is a hard-coded version. I need to refactor this so that it's not sticky on 20, but at the time, this is what it was. And then we're going to install the dependencies, and npm CI is a CLI-friendly version of npm install. And so it's going to install any dependencies that Prettier needs, and then here's the run, the command to npm run format check. And that's the same, that's what I set up in my package.json in the scripts key. Thank you. So here is what that file translates to on GitHub. So when you're looking at the job in GitHub, you can see here it's running the npm run format :check. And I got a result, all match files use prettier code style. So it passed. So if there was a failure or there were any errors, they would show up in that console. And then after that, my build and deploy jobs run. And you can see that they're running one after another here. Okay, so what progress have I made now? I can commit changes on my branch and push it to a repo. I can now create a pull request, and that's going to trigger a quality check. It's going to trigger my prettier command. And then I can see if that passes or fails. And if I get a green check on that, then I can feel confident that, okay, well, at least my code style is formatted the way that I want it. And I'm going to merge the pull request into the main branch, which is then going to trigger an automatic deployment via GitHub Pages. So I'm doing pretty good now. So let me just pause here and let's check in about some of the concepts that I learned so far in this process. I learned that there is this config file. So whether it's a workflows file in GitHub or whatever it might be, depending on the platform or the tool, there's a config file. And this is in version control. It's a version controlled file in your repo that defines an automation. It's going to describe the environment, the triggers, the jobs, and the steps, and how they connect into a pipeline. and it's going to be located and named predictably per platform. So something is going to be looking for that file, and it needs to be in a certain location or named a certain way, or both. So here in my .github/workflows, I ended up making a whole bunch of different workflows. So I've got a deploy, a lint, a pipeline. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. Security checks, a scheduled workflow that updates the theme, that keeps it up to date in Hugo, and that's what I got for free with that repo, template repository, and even one to run Veil on the pros, since this is a site that's my blog, and I wanted to have a check for checking how I'm writing. The next concept is the environment. So we need to set up the environment. You want to think of the container situation, where this is an empty container. I need to fill it with an operating system. I need to have software in that container that is going to be able to run this command. So you need to be thinking about the dependencies that you need to run whatever command that it is that you want. So in this case, I've got Dart SAS, which I don't strictly need, but it was part of the dependencies. Go, so Hugo runs on Go, and so that's why I needed Go. And Node, I needed Node because of Prettier. And then the time zone, I needed that to be set in the environment because of the scheduled job that is running for the update theme. So when you examine the jobs on GitHub, you can see the setup, all this different setups phases, and how it's the versions that are being installed are going to correspond to whatever's in your config file. So you can verify that all of that is matching up. If you're running into a conflict or errors because you're using code that is no longer compatible, you can double check. You can have a sanity check and see are things matching up here. But you can see how in this video, the version numbers in the config file are matching up with what is being run in the pipeline. The next concept is jobs. And so in the build and deploy workflow that I got for free, I've got a build and deploy job. And so within that's going to show up in the UI in the status checks. So it's going to be named that. And then you can have a series of things that are done within those jobs. And the things within that are called steps, and I'll move on to that in a minute. But jobs, you can see here in GitHub Pages how there's a build and a deploy job, and they can relate to each other. So in this workflow, we've got two jobs, and they have a distinct set of steps within them. So it's kind of nice that you can have multiple jobs inside one workflow. Steps are what are inside of a job. So in this example, we've got 5 steps. We're checking out the code. We're setting up Node.js. We're installing dependencies. We're running Prettier, and I'm running Markdown. So once I added Prettier, I'm like, oh, what else can I run? I'm going to run a Markdown check. Oh, so you can have a lot of fun adding the checks that you want, as long as they're useful to you and they help you have a better quality product for whatever it is that you're doing. So you can see when you examine the job in GitHub, you can see the individual steps within each job. So you could toggle open the job, and then you can see exactly what commands were run inside there. So that's really useful. And any kind of errors that happened within that. Triggers is the next concept that's really important in this whole thing. And you can see what it'll tell you in GitHub what was the trigger. So it was triggered because there was a push to main. It was triggered because it was manually triggered, whatever it was. These automatic workflows happen because they're triggered in some way. In the config file, you you declare how you want them triggered. Do you want it on a push to main, a pull request, a workflow dispatch, or any kind, do you want it to run manually? Do you want it to be called from some other file, which is what I'm going to get into in a minute. So finally, like what I noticed when I was experimenting was that these jobs, they were all running concurrently. They were running in parallel. I had Markdown and Prettier and Veil running, and I noticed that they're all running at once. And the build and deploy was also running regardless of what was happening elsewhere. And what I wanted was the build to stop. I wanted the build to fail if one of these checks didn't pass. Like, I didn't want these to be, like, some of the checks I wanted to be optional. Like Veil, I'm just kind of curious what it outputs, but I don't want it to block my build because there's a lot of errors in there. I could spend a whole university degree trying to write up to the standard of Veil, right? But Markdown, yeah, I definitely want that to block. Like if there's invalid syntax in my blog posts or in my code somewhere, I want it to fail the build. I don't want that to go up on the website and make me look foolish. And so I needed to set up an orchestrator, a pipeline, so that I could define what was going to happen, the flow, and I could orchestrate these workflows and connect them into a pipeline. Okay, so, madam, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to now show you how I refactored my different workflows into a pipeline. If I can type. Okay, so I had lint, deploy, security, and pipeline. And what I'm going to do is, it's been a few months since I had worked on this, and so I had Claude dig into the commit history of this project and explain what pipeline does and how it evolved. And so I'm going to start with what it does. So pipeline.yml is the orchestrator. It fires on pushes and PRs to main. So here's the push and here's the pull request. And the lint job, so now I'm saying that it's going, whoops, there's so much help going on here. The lint job is going to use that file. And the security job is going to use the security.yml file. So instead of having just a job that defines everything and it's just going to run in parallel or concurrently, I have this pipeline that is going to call these other files here. So, and then the deploy is going to need the lint and the wow, so much help. The lint and the security workflows before it can proceed. And it's also going to need the permissions that I set in the deploy job. I need to copy those into here. And then finally, the permissions block on this permissions block right here on the deploy job is required because GitHub Actions won't propagate those to a called workflow unless the caller explicitly grants them. So even though this permissions block is in this deploy file, I needed to copy that over into this file. So how did this all evolve? So the lint job, first, as I mentioned, it was created as a standalone workflow with its own push and pull request. And what I needed to do was update the trigger to workflow call. So because in pipeline, I'm doing this line right here, this uses line. So it's no longer running on a trigger to push to the main branch or for a pull request, it's only being triggered by this workflow call from pipeline.yml. And the other thing in pipeline was I needed to add this right here, this condition, because I don't want the deploy job to run on this trigger on pull requests. I only want it to run if it's being merged into, if the pull request is being merged, right? And so this is saying only if it's a push to main. Here's the ref right there. If it's a push to main, will the deploy. So this is kind of an exception to that rule. So I kind of had to finagle that. What I noticed when I was refactoring this was that I found a security bug. And one of the jobs was failing, and I was so focused on what I did to create the testing regimen that I went through to refactor this was I put some bad markdown into one of my blog posts so that it would fail, because I wanted to test that the build would fail, it wouldn't proceed if there was a problem with the lint workflow. And so once I finally got things moving along, what I failed to notice until a little bit later was that there was actually I put an npm audit command in the build and deploy, in the deploy.yaml. And it was kind of buried in there, and it was running a supply chain audit on the dependencies to see if there were any security vulnerabilities. And I'd forgotten all about it. And so what I did was I finally noticed that that's what was failing. And so I pulled out that npm audit into a security.yml workflow so that it was surfaced and I wouldn't forget about it, and I would remember that it was it's an important thing. It doesn't need to be buried somewhere. So that was another, and then I added the security job to the pipeline. So now I have visibility. I can see like the pipeline is surfacing the jobs that are running, and it's making sense to me now. And I'm not forgetting about all these commands that are running, because these files, these workflow files, can get pretty complicated. And so by having an orchestrator, it helps me keep track of what's actually being run. And let me tell you, this audit has been really super useful because, as you know, keeping track of dependencies and their updates and the vulnerabilities, just the Wild West right now. So there's so many different things that you can check for quality. You can check code quality, you can automated tests, SEO, visual diffs, accessibility, performance, supply chain security, on and on and on. So there's just so many opportunities. Think of one tool that you love to use in your IDE that you use locally that you could add to a CI/CD pipeline that would run on pull requests that would run automatically. And so if you forget to run it on your local, you've got this security or this quality gate on the pull request level that's making sure that it's running. So all the best practices that you're doing on your local, enforce that on yourself and put that into a CI/CD pipeline so it's going to run automatically on every pull request. So here is final boss demo. So what I have is an update. I'm pushing up an update to the wallpaper, and I'm going to open a pull request. So I'm going to the pull request now. I'm about to create it, and so remember, this is going to trigger a workflow. And we can see that I've got my pipelines. Here's it likes to jump around because they show up. So here we're setting up Node, we're installing dependencies, we're running the prettier check and the markdown check, and we're doing some cleanup here. So that all happened. It's happened super fast. I'm going back into my pull request, And I've also got Tugboat lined up. And Tugboat is something that it's a similar thing that you can inject into a CI/CD pipeline, and it's using I've got a Tugboat config file in my repo, and I've also authorized GitHub in Tugboat, and so it's listening through a webhook for that pull request. And so I get some things for free, like visual diffs and Google Lighthouse reports. So I can see that, yeah, this was an expected change because I changed the wallpaper, and there should be a visual diff there. So this is just a log of what was happening during the build. I also get Google Lighthouse reports, so I can see reports for performance, accessibility, best practices, SEO, and how well it would be as a progressive web app, which apparently not so good. So heading back, I can see that everything has run except for deploy, because I'm still in the merge. I'm still in the pull request right now. So now, once I merge, now the deploy job is going to get triggered. So I'm going to go into the Actions tab, and I can see the workflow is running, and I can see, okay, lint is running again, security is running again, and here's the deploy, the build job in the deploy workflow is now running. And this takes, I don't know, 20 seconds or so, maybe less. And so all of those steps are running there, and we're also going to get the deploy job in the deploy workflow, not confusing at all. And so now it's telling me that it's getting ready to deploy to GitHub Pages. And before I did the orchestrator with the pipeline, this deployment was just happening automatically. It was just being triggered on a push to main. But now I've got it in this workflow where it's only going to run after all these jobs are complete, and it's just when you're merging into main. So that is my progress. It's the same thing that I started with, but it's much more robust because I'm orchestrating which quality checks need to block the build and when deployment can actually happen. So before, everything was just happening at once. All of these workflows were running in parallel. Once I orchestrated them into a pipeline, now I can block the build when certain things certain things fail. So I've got the same progress, but it's so much cooler now because I've got orchestration. So just to recap, I created a sandbox. The sandbox that I created was using a GitHub repo that included a build and deploy and an automatic theme updater workflow for free. I created the sandbox so that I could learn some CI/CD concepts. And I talked about a process of thinking about a local CLI tool that you like to use on your machine and adding that to a CI/CD pipeline. We talked about 6 essential concepts, the config file, which is going to define the other things that we're talking about. The config file is in version control. It's got a predictable name and location so that it can be found by whatever platform is looking for it. The environment, thinking about what did I need to run this, and thinking about it from a real bare bones perspective, like, oh, I need an operating system and I need certain software in order to run this command. And then the jobs. I can define different jobs in a workflow. I can have more than one. And within those jobs, I can define steps. These are the setup. I can run other GitHub actions from the marketplace. I can run commands. Now that I've set up the environment, I can run these steps. And then triggers, and this is the real key to running automatic workflows. These aren't just running whenever they want. They're running on certain triggers. And these can be things like a push to a certain branch, or a pull request, or a manual trigger, or being called by another file. And then how the pipeline, and how that can really help orchestrate the whole process and bring clarity to what is happening. You can accumulate these workflow files pretty quickly on a project, and it helps to have a pipeline file to to orchestrate what it is that's going to happen and what what, if any, relationship should occur between these workflows. I've got some resources here. You can check out my repo. It's public. You can poke around those files and see how things were done. The GitHub Actions Marketplace is also a good resource, and the GitHub Actions docs explain a lot of these concepts really in depth. That can be a really helpful resource as well. So I encourage you to go forth and build your first CI/CD pipeline, add a quality check while you're at it, and if you so choose, you can please connect with me on LinkedIn if you like. Are there any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for attending my talk, and I hope to see you all in the future. Thank you.